Welcome to Pedo Teeth Talk, brought to you by the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, a show that delivers cutting-edge ideas for the professional specializing in pediatric dentistry and promotes the highest standards of patient care with today's top experts in the field. Now here's your host, Dr. Joel Berg.
Thank you for tuning in to Pedo Teeth Talk, where we bring you the contemporary issues important to you and your practice, brought to you by the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry. And thank you to our Pedo Teeth Talk sponsor, Hugh Freedy, for helping us bring you great content. We couldn't do this without them. Visit them at www.hughfreedy.com. That's HU-FRIEDY.com. We are here today with Dr. Eyal Simchi. Dr. Simchi is the owner of Riverfront Pediatric Dentistry and is a dentist who does things differently. His combination of minimally invasive dental techniques, as well as his innovative behavior management style, have made him a trailblazer in the field of pediatric dentistry. I'm going to repeat that sentence. His combination of minimally invasive dental techniques, as well as his innovative behavior management style, have made him a trailblazer in the field of pediatric dentistry. His use of silver diamine fluoride, SDF, has been featured in the New York Times, and his magic tricks, which we're going to talk a little bit about as well, have been shown on NBC Nightly News as well as the Kelly Clarkson Show. Dr. Simchi is a sought-after lecturer and is frequently consulted by dentists around the world for difficult cases in pediatric dentistry. He is a contributing author to Smart Oral Health. We're going to talk about that, the medical management of caries, as well as the textbook on behavior management in dentistry for children. Dr. Simchi, thanks for being with us today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's really an honor. I appreciate it.
Well, it's an honor for me. You know, I'm one of your fans, and there are many around the world. In fact, I checked that you've got on social media, if you look at all the different places, well over 100,000 followers. And when I talk to anybody regarding anything about pediatric dentistry, your name comes up. Oh yeah, I've seen him. And even people that aren't in the health professions know about you. So congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
For helping us all.
Still not sure how it happened.
Well, it happened because you do some good things. So you like to talk about, when you and I chatted about our podcast today, I think you summarized sort of a theme of our conversation is changing our mindset in dentistry. So maybe to start out, what do you mean by that, changing our mindset in dentistry at a high level?
So I feel like when I was in dental school and residency, we were taught certain things that were taught sort of as a truth, and this is sort of a fact of how it is. And I see from just the research that I'm reading, I try to stay up to date with whatever I can. I see that things do change over time, and we're seeing that some of the things that we thought were absolutes are definitely not absolutes. So in our practice, we try to incorporate whatever we can to make our practice, an inviting place for our patients. As a kid, I really didn't like going to the dentist. So when I became a dentist, I felt like a big part of my focus is going to be on trying to make that different for our patients. And for me, that took just a mindset change from sort of like a get in there and get the work done. When I was in residency, my director, Dr. Kravitz, told me, always remember that the tooth is attached to a person. And it just really stuck with me. And I felt like, that's a really different mindset, because I was used to just sort of being tunnel vision into the tooth and, specific to the dentistry part of it. And I felt like at some points we didn't take the human attached to the dentistry part as seriously. So for me, that mindset change of trying to do whatever I can led me sort of to where I am.
So you mentioned you didn't have necessarily a great experience as a child, as a patient in the dental office. Would you mind just telling us a little bit about that, what you remember?
Well, I will tell you that I'm an adult now. I'm a dentist now. I work in a dental office. And when I smell a dental practice that smells like the dental practice that I used to go to, it still stresses me out. So I think that as pediatric dentists, we see that a lot of patients have different specific sensitivities. And when I was a kid, I probably had all of those put together. So my dentist was a really nice guy, but it didn't really work well for me. So I just remember every experience not being very positive.
Yeah, I think it was probably eugenol is the famous dental smell, most likely, right?
Yep.
Still, it triggers a lot of us. I think eugenol, which is a very interesting chemical, but we'll talk about that another time. So when you talk about seeing what would be possible, and as I mentioned in the intro, a lot of people know you because you're your magic. And I'm going to jump to that. It's pretty enlightening and it's pretty attractive, and you can see the kids' eyes light up when you watch your YouTube videos. Tell us just briefly how you got into this, and and how it's changed your practice.
So it really just happened, mostly thanks to my wife. I was walking in the mall, and I was never really into magic, but there was a kiosk with somebody doing the trick that went viral. And we were watching for a few minutes, and I just couldn't figure out what he was doing. There was something there, and then there wasn't something there. And it was really amazing to me, but then I just pretty much was ready to walk on. And my wife actually suggested, as somebody going into a field that I was hoping to work with children, she was like, why don't you just buy the trick and see if it works for you? And that's really what started that process. And in dental school and residency, I saw the major difference that it had just from that little interaction. And it really changed my patient's interaction with me from somebody who is like another doctor or another medical professional that may be a little nerve-wracking to just, hey, that's a cool trick. And it took the focus off the medical part of it, and it made more of a connection.
You probably, I'm imagining, given your experience as a child, and you're not a child now, I agree, that you probably saw the magic working and kind of transforming this child in you into this child in front of you, this actual child, and you're seeing a different experience immediately because of your interaction. Is that a fair statement?
Absolutely. We have patients that come in that have had difficult experiences in the past, and they don't even want to look at me, but they see that little light show up and they kind of turn their head a little bit just to see what's going on. And it just makes that initial connection.
Have you had parents or people, new patients, come to your office because they heard about your this work, this magic work?
We've had patients from all over the world contact us, and some people even fly in just because of the things that we do differently.
Well, that's fantastic. I think that's great credit to you and your discovery there. And I imagine others want to learn from you about that. But let's talk about some of the other things regarding changing the mindset. You were referring to all of us, the fact that all of us in our training, we hear things and they're sort of deemed to be absolute. You have to do it this way. It's always this way. But you want us to think differently. And one of the examples is glass ionomers in the restorative realm versus composite. This is a big thing for me because I did a lot of research in the past on glass ionomers, but even to this day, they haven't really stuck to the extent they should. So tell us your perspective of why you choose them sometimes over other restorative materials.
So it was actually funny. I'm part of a WhatsApp group of a bunch of different dentists, and we were discussing it, and it was a discussion until past 1 o'clock in the morning, just trying to get people to even consider the fact that glass ionomers may be something that is worthwhile to look into. I felt like when I was in dental school, it was really mentioned in a dental materials class, which most people didn't want to listen to in the first place. We had very, very limited experience using it at all. I was lucky in residency that one of my attendings, Dr. Sleepak, was really into glass ionomers. I don't really know the history of how he got into glass ionomers, but my residency also was pretty open-minded in allowing us to try techniques that they felt may work. So it really gave me that opportunity to sort of expand my knowledge. I've always been pretty much a nerd, so I love reading things. And I remember reading on different online forums how glass ionomers were used in different countries and how often they're used. Initially I was using it mostly in a sandwich type of technique, but over time I realized as materials keep evolving and getting better and better, all the things that we learned about dental materials and what we learned about the glass ionomers and all the negatives were really not as negative anymore. The initial materials obviously were weaker and uglier, but the newer materials seem to be amazing and they really hold up. And they also have, for me at least, a medicinal purpose versus just patching a tooth. We're doing something that may actually help the tooth.
That's great. Can you give us an example of a situation where maybe many would choose composite, but you say, no, with my experience and background, I think a glass ionomer is appropriate for this circumstance?
So in our practice, primary teeth, unless a parent refuses a glass ionomer for whatever reason, gets a glass ionomer if it's going to be restored with the restorative material. I don't use composite on primary teeth at all. But there are specific situations that I find that glass ionomer beat almost any other material are hypoplastic molars. And areas where we just can't get great isolation. So if we have 6s or 7s that are erupting and there's something starting already, amalgam can work. A lot of practices don't use amalgam as much anymore. But I find like I've seen many patients come in that have had composites placed and it's really close to impossible to get good isolation and the composites over time just fail. And glass ionomer in those situations for me is a winner.
Yeah, I often say, with a composite, which is a great material, given its technique sensitivity, you have to have three things to make it work every time. And those are isolation, cooperation, and time.
Absolutely.
And rarely do we have all three of those present. Whereas with glass ionomer, those are all mitigated in our favor. So
Right.
I think for kids especially, so I love to hear what you're saying about that. We will now pause for a word from our sponsor.
Do you need additional CE hours but don't have time to travel to courses? Did you attend the annual session and want to listen to the audio recordings? Check out AAPD's Education Passport, an online learning center, where you can earn CE and listen to audio recordings from all of our continuing education courses and more. Visit educationpassport.aapd.org.
We are back with Dr. Eyal Simchi of Riverfront Pediatric Dentistry. He's an innovator. He challenges our thinking, and he's woken us up about non-pharmacological techniques in behavior management in a world where, we do both non-pharmacological and pharmacological, but in some ways, the non-pharmacological, just the old-fashioned behavior management, seems to be a vestigial thing of the past. Yet you're saying, no, that's in my present every day. Maybe you want to comment on that a little bit, please.
I've seen over time, and I haven't been doing it for that long, that the trends seem to be pushing much more to pharmacological, a lot more sedation than there was. A friend of mine teaches in a residency program, and he said when he started teaching, they were discussing behavior management, and now it's sort of slowly fading away into more sedation. I think sedation definitely has a place in medicine and in dentistry, but there are risks involved. There are studies being done on how sedation affects developing mind. So for me, I just felt like avoiding that, if I could, and still keep my patient healthy and happy, was really a goal that I wanted. And I also feel to some extent, I remember speaking to somebody, and he was saying that when you sedate a patient, you haven't really changed their view of dentistry because they don't really have a view of dentistry, versus our goal is to really change our patient's perspective of the dental world. So it's not just getting the work done, it's also changing their perspective of what dentistry really is.
So to talk a little bit about this non-pharmacological, let's just call it behavior management approach, besides magic, which maybe we'll touch on again, what are some of the other elements that you bring to the table?
So we do a little of everything. I try to think outside the box, and I try to not really get focused on one specific thing. And when I work with my associates, I always tell them, try to have as many tools as you have, and then that way you could pick out what you need when you need it. Every patient is different. Some kids have a tough day one day and do fine another day, and the way you interact with them every day needs to be different. From a big family, I've always been around kids, so luckily I've gotten sort of that knowledge just from growing up around everybody. I have 6 kids of my own, so for me, it's, tell, show, do is always the gold standard, but we tell, show, do, plus we have our patients sometimes do it. When we have modeling, sometimes I'll be the model. So we really try to push it in whatever way works for that specific patient, and sort of not get the mindset that this is what we have to do for this situation, because the situation may change in a second.
I have to say, Dr. Simchi, I'm very impressed with your passion and enthusiasm. You have 6 kids, you're a busy guy, and you're on fire with your ideas. So I love it.
Thank you.
So let's talk a little bit about what my favorite subject, what you and I were talking about, which is medical versus surgical management. In medicine, when you take your children or yourself to the medical doctor, to the physician, they're either going to be a surgeon or a primary care medicine doctor. It's very distinct. In dentistry, we're surgeons, basically, historically, and there's a lot to talk about there. But, we're also medical doctors. We're internal medicine doctors. So tell us how you manifest that and what your thinking is on, because I know you do a lot of what things we're going to discuss, like the SMART technique, minimally invasive, but just in general, what's your perspective on medical versus surgical dentistry, and how do you share that with the parents? I'm curious to hear how you talk to parents about that.
So actually, very often parents will tell me that, my kid's brushing well, you're probably not happy because you want him to have cavities. And I always tell them, I will still pay my bills without fixing any cavities ever, and I'm much happier if they have no cavities. And the way I approach it is, generally my take on it is, the best dentistry is no dentistry. The less we do for a tooth, the happier that tooth is, and the less we're going to eventually have to do for that tooth. So for me, medical treatment of the tooth is a more preventive mindset versus being reactive to what the situation is. I'd rather be proactive and prevent the situation in the first place. And because we're now seeing that cavities are not an absolute thing, we can see things are remineralizing and demineralizing. We have time periods where we can actually reverse the process and go back in time a little bit, versus once you go surgically, you're already moving into that sort of surgical field, and there's really no going back from that. So generally, sort of what pushed it in for me was getting that behavior management and seeing how little I could do for a patient and still help their oral hygiene and their oral health in general. And then I realized over time that these techniques are not just things that I have to do for a tough patient, they work for everybody. So whereas at the beginning when I started doing the Hall technique, it was something that I reserved for a situation where I didn't have another option, now I don't see any benefit to not doing it. So it's sort of evolved over time.
I understand. So let's take a case, for example, a parent brings their child in and they maybe have some later stage early childhood caries. Let's say it's a 4-year-old, a 5-year-old, whatever. And I say that age because maybe you have an opportunity to do some non-pharmacological behavior management. So the parents coming in, they're feeling shame, they're feeling guilt. They feel like they've neglected something. They realize, okay, Sally or Johnny is going to have a bunch of fillings, and that may be true. But your approach to them is what I'm curious about. How do you engage in that conversation? Because I can imagine there could be elements of both medical and surgical in that case.
Absolutely. So I always start when a parent tells me they feel guilty by telling them, don't feel guilty. I'm a dentist. My kids have gotten cavities. It can happen. And a lot of the times part of it is just education that happens a little too late. So we start with just trying to get the education started at that point, because I tell the parents that, now it is what it is. We just want to make sure that this doesn't continue like this. So when it comes to, we try to really take a multi-step approach in the practice as well. If it's a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old, and sometimes we're surprised, 4-year-olds and 5-year-olds can sit for whatever dental treatment they need at times. If they're a little younger or unable to cooperate as well for specific situations, because of the things that now we have available, like silver fluoride, glass ionomers, and other options that we have, we can sometimes push sort of the situation down the road a little bit to when they're a little more able to cooperate with what would be considered more conventional or a more permanent restoration. So for me, my goal is to stabilize the situation as it is right now. I don't need it to look beautiful, because if somebody sees it, they're going to say, hey, that looks all messy and there's SDF on that tooth. For me, the beauty is in the simplicity and in the fact that my patient is happy when they leave. That being said, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead, please.
I was going to say that typically I feel like if a patient does not have decay that's causing pulpitis, I'd say probably 99% of the time I can get whatever they need done without any type of sedation and without any trauma at all.
Yeah, that's great. In that regard, I go back to your magic, which is magic. And I'm thinking about how and when do you deploy it? So let's say I'm that child who may need some restorative. They're 4 or 5 years old. Do you engage them with this magic or other of these techniques at the first visit immediately? At what point, when they get in the chair, do you start? How do you decide? Does every patient get it? And then regarding restorative, how do you use it? I'm just curious the logistics of deployment.
Right. So it's really all of the above. I always have something in my pocket at some point or on the desk next to me. We even try to get it started really before they even come in for any treatment. So first appointment, they're coming in just for a hygiene exam or a checkup. We already want to sort of take the focus off the dental part of it. A lot of our patients that come in have already had more difficult experiences at dental offices. So we really want to sort of show them the difference between what it was and what it can be. So it really happens whatever time I feel like it needs to be. There are some times where I'll stop in the middle of treatment, or even as we're doing treatment. For us, anything can be magic. I tell our patients that if they want to stop something, for instance, a handpiece, they can raise their hand and it will stop. And we just make that into a magic trick that their hand magically stopped the handpiece. So really, anything that's surprising.
It did.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. In our practice, if you raise your hand, whatever we're doing is going to stop, even if it's 100 times.
Wow. Well, you're enlightening for all of us. And I have to ask you, as a sort of a final statement from you, But what's next for you? What are your plans for you? You're an innovator. You're talking to us about changing our mindset. So you must have something in your strategic plan in your mind.
I'd like to focus on how we can sort of change the trends of dentistry to preventive more than restorative. And I've been discussing with my associate for a while how we can try to even tweak our practice to try to push it even more than we already do, because I feel like as we get more and more options available to us, we'll have more of an opportunity to do that. And even though we're not going to be able to prevent every cavity, the more we prevent, the less we do, and the happier and healthier our patients are. So that's something I'd like to push a little bit. And then I do not like speaking in public at all, but I feel like I do have something that I can present to other people and hopefully make a change in the profession. So I'm trying to spread the word as much as I can.
Well, I'll be your agent. So if you let me hire you or you hire me free of charge,
Absolutely.
Because you have so much to offer, I want to support you. And I think you've got a lot of friends and colleagues who are right there with you on this medical management thing. It's my favorite subject. I'm happy to see your way of using it, which is fantastic. So there's a lot of excitement there. So I suspect you and I'll be talking again on this topic and many others. So Dr. Simchi, thanks so much for being with us today.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you for tuning into Pedo Teeth Talk, where we bring you the contemporary issues important to you and your practice. We'll see you here next time.
Do you need additional CE hours but don't have time to travel to courses? Did you attend annual session and want to listen to the audio recordings? Check out AAPD's new Education Passport. The redesigned and improved Education Passport is AAPD's online learning center, where you can earn CE and listen to audio recordings from all of our continuing education courses and more. Visit educationpassport.aapd.org for more information. For 10% off any product, use discount code TEETHTALK in the Education Passport store. Pedo Teeth Talk is the show that delivers cutting-edge ideas for the professional specializing in pediatric dentistry. Be sure to check out previous episodes of Pedo Teeth Talk, as well as our other podcast platform, Newly Erupted. All previous episodes are available on our website. We welcome your ideas for future shows and guests. For more information on the American Academy of Pediatric Dentistry, visit aapd.org.